Welcome to the Liberal Europe podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Silvestre, and thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And for this conversation, I'm very happy to bring you Dr. Manuel Fernández Ordóñez. Manuel is the director of the Peter Huber Institute for Energy Research at Universidad de Hespérides, and he has a PhD in nuclear physics and undergrad in particle physics. He has a book published called Nuclear Yes Please, and he's also a columnist in Spanish newspapers on the topic. He's also a resident expert in energy at Fundalib, our friends from Madrid, and ELF-MO. We talk about the potential of having nuclear energy in the energy mix, safety issues, and emerging technologies. And after our main conversation, please stay to hear a little more about the path that Manuel Fernández took until I got him on the podcast. But now, with no further ado, I bring you Dr. Manuel Fernández Ordóñez. I'm here with Manuel Fernández Ordóñez. Manuel, thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. We are at the offices of Fundalib in Madrid. Actually, we have some work done with the European Liberal Forum about the promises of nuclear energy. We also have the examples, which is successful some places, other places there's too much resistance. So tell us a little bit where we are, in your opinion, on the European Union regarding the debate of the importance of nuclear energy for the energy mix.
Yeah, well, nuclear energy is vital for future of European energy. Okay, so because if you take a look at the global scope, so nuclear energy is producing around 10% of the world electricity. Mm-hmm. Okay, but not all the countries in the world have nuclear power. So if you take a look of the countries which they have nuclear power plants, then the electricity production is around 20%. If you go to the 25 countries in the list of GDP, the first 25 countries, 22 have nuclear power. And the other three, one is Germany, which recently abandoned nuclear energy, which was an enormous mistake that they are paying now, and we can talk a little bit later about that. And the other one is Italy, that they abandoned nuclear energy in the 80s, okay, but now they are thinking about coming back, so to develop a new nuclear program in Italy. So the most advanced countries in the world, they have nuclear energy, they support nuclear energy, and they are working to increase the share of nuclear energy in their energy systems. Actually, in the last COP28 in the Emirates, all of these countries, they issue a statement to triple nuclear energy by 2050. Okay, so nuclear energy is very important in the world. Concerning Europe, nuclear energy is producing around 20% of the European electricity, but it's around 30% of the clean electricity. Okay, so if you take into account all the clean electricity, solar, wind, hydro, biomass, well, biomass is not clean, but let's consider clean for the discussion, okay? And nuclear is almost 1/3 of the cake, okay? So it's very important, and this is what the European Commission and the European Parliament said a couple of years ago with the taxonomy, okay? That nuclear is completely vital for the future of energy in Europe, and we need to invest in nuclear because we will not get it. I mean, we will not achieve the goals, we will not achieve the objectives, so climate objectives, if we don't use nuclear energy. It's a fact.
Still, and I was in Milan, and actually Fundalib was also invited for that. We were talking about an energy observatory that we have in the Mediterranean, and I totally understand what you're saying, which is our Italian friends are not trying to recover from that terrible mistake that they did on the 80s. But still, there's a lot of, I'm going to say here, Manuel, two levels of resistance, and we'll tackle them separately. One, it's the political one, like we saw in Germany. That was completely absurd, and we're going to get into that. The other one has to do with the general population. There's a lot of misconceptions. I am so often confronted with Chernobyl, And I keep saying Chernobyl is not an example that you can use when you think about, for example, Eastern Europe or Korea or even the United States, even if there was a nuclear reactor problem in the United States. But tell us a little bit from your vantage point, where are the biggest misconceptions on the public debate?
Well, the point is that if you take a look at the history of nuclear energy, you will see that it was developed since the 50s, okay, especially in the 70s, 80s. This was where the bulk of nuclear power plants were built in Europe. So the point is that nuclear energy, of course, is a complex matter. It's complex science, it's complex engineering behind. So it's not easy to explain to the public, the minor aspects of nuclear energy, the insights of nuclear energy. So as a complex matter, it's very difficult to elaborate narratives against nuclear because almost nobody understands it.
That's a great point. Mm-hmm.
Okay?
I see that in Portugal, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, you can find this whatever technology you want, okay? But it's the reality that when a technology is complex, it's very easy to build narratives that are not true, but the people will buy it. The people will believe it. In addition, the nuclear sector, historically didn't want to fight this battle. Okay, they always took a quiet profile, low profile. Okay, they didn't want to talk to public because actually they didn't think this was important. Okay, that the public opinion has maybe nothing to say about the nuclear about the energy policy in general. Okay, and they lose the battle. They lose the battle because they didn't appear. Okay, so. These past decades, since the 60s, especially the 70s, all the narrative against nuclear energy, they were alone in the arena. They were the only narratives in the arena. There were no pro-nuclear narratives at all. Okay? So after 30, 40, 50 years of anti-nuclear narratives, I can get that society is anti-nuclear. Of course they are. Okay? But the point is that this is changing. Okay, at a certain point with the beginning of a new century, and especially in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, nuclear sector, nuclear industry understood that public opinion is the key. Okay, and that we need to appear in the battle. Okay, and we need to build the narrative, the correct narrative. We need to put the facts over the table. We need to put the figures, we need to put the numbers, and explain to people that, okay, guys, without nuclear, we cannot go any longer. I mean, we will not achieve any goal, any sustainability goal, any climate goal. We will not get any goal without nuclear. Okay, but of course you have 50 years of resistance there. Okay, but this is not the same in every country. It depends on the country. Okay, for example, in Spain you have a really strong anti-nuclear movement. But you don't have these kind of movements, for example, in Finland. In Finland, even the Green Party is pro-nuclear. Or you can take countries that they are doing 180 degrees turn in policy. For example, Sweden. Sweden was about to close all the nuclear power plants, and then they are going to build more nuclear power plants with the change in government. Same in Belgium, same in Holland, same in all the eastern countries. So it's not the same in every country, and it's also not directly related with the color of the government, because you have, as I mentioned, green parties in Finland that they are pro-nuclear. You have Socialist Party in France, which is not against nuclear. It's not very pro, but it's not against. You have other socialist countries that they are not against nuclear, and then you have Spain, which is really, really against nuclear, or you have Austria, or you have Germany that they are really against, or even Luxembourg. Okay, so you cannot find a direct, correlation between the color of the government and the position with nuclear. But as a summary, we get that the people is majority anti-nuclear, but this is changing. And the latest polls in Europe show us that the support to nuclear energy is increasing. Even in Germany, right before shutting down the last 3 nuclear power plants, the majority of the population in Germany was against shutting down those nuclear power plants. Okay, so things are changing, fortunately.
Yeah, then there is also a question of geopolitics regarding energy coming from Russia. And then all of a sudden they have to cut that down, and now they are running against time. Now let me stay in this because this is really important. And as I said just a minute ago, actually I was in Brussels last week, and this was brought up again and again and again, which is Fukushima, naturally Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. But I always use the analogy of the planes that don't crash, which is there's a plane that crashes and then there's like 100,000 planes in the air flying correctly and with maximum safety. And I think also, and help me out here, Manuel, in your opinion, I also think that we have to break that idea, which is it's a danger to happen at any moment. Any moment there's going to be a nuclear reactor explosion somewhere in Europe. That is not true. We've been using nuclear reactors. Actually, you mentioned France. Of course, it isn't 100% safe, but what is? A plane can fall at any time. But tell us a little bit, how can we break this spell? And a TV series like Chernobyl was just so well done. I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so well done. But on the other hand, it's increasing that irrational fear, which is a nuclear power plant in Spain or in Portugal or in France is going to explode tomorrow. So please get into a little bit into security issues.
Yeah, first thing we have to mention here, and it's a very important thing, is that the nuclear energy is the safest way of electricity production.
Exactly.
Safest. You need to go to the data, okay? But if you go to the data, if you take the time to go to the data, if you take the time and you are willing to know the truth, then you will realize that nuclear is the safest. It's safer than solar, it's safer than wind, it's safer than anything. Okay? First thing. Second thing, nuclear energy is a really mature technology. We have an experience of almost 20,000 years reactor. This means that, imagine that you only have 1 reactor in the world. We have been operating this for 20,000 years. And this is the combination of all the years of operation of all the reactors in the world. Okay, that there were hundreds of reactors in the world. So it's a really mature technology. And we have, in the past, we have 3 main nuclear accidents. First one, in the 79, you mentioned 3 Mile Island. Not a single casualty. 0 casualties. Then we have Chernobyl, I will talk a little bit later. First Fukushima, 2011, the biggest nuclear accident in the world. 4 nuclear reactors involved in the accident at the same time. No casualty at all. And then we have Chernobyl in the 86, okay? So we have several casualties here, but it was, take a look at the reality of the accident, okay? So we have a bad design of a reactor, okay? It was not correctly designed. Such a reactor would never be operating in a Western country, never, okay? It was bad design, and the people knew it was bad design, and they said nothing, okay? They were trying to do some test, ironically, a safety test, okay? With people that was not trained for that. They didn't have the skill, they didn't have the information.
And they have the ambition.
Okay, and they have the ambition. And most important, they were involved, they were involved in an ecosystem where you could not question the decisions of people above you. There was no safety authority. There was no institute, nothing to report if something was wrong. And everybody knew that there were many things wrong with that reactor, okay? But it was a consequence of a lot of, characteristics of the Soviet regime. So Chernobyl accident is not an argument against nuclear. It's an argument against communism.
Actually, Manuel, for all the resistance building that TV show has, again, by showing all the failures that you just mentioned a minute ago, there is a very powerful message by the end, because when Legazov is testifying and is asked, well, why this happened and it doesn't happen someplace else, he immediately said, well, because our friends in the West, they do things correctly. They don't have graphite tips on the nuclear reactor. They have containers. We just do it cheaper, and therefore problems will happen. And I remember seeing that sentence in particular, and that was like, there it is. There's the argument why nuclear energy is safe in the western part of Europe, and it wouldn't happen, that kind of mistakes. And exactly as we said, because we have more regulations, we are more safety, we have more layers of decision making. So again, that is a discussion that will keep on going. Yes, please.
Yeah, but if you just a tiny information. At the end, the Chernobyl accident was a mixture of many small mistakes, okay, in the chain, but they had a huge problem with the control rods in the reactor, and they knew this problem because they had a similar problem like 4 years before in the Ignalina reactor, okay. And they hide this. And after the accident, they went to the International Atomic Energy in Austria, and they lied. Yes. They lied to everyone. Okay? So this was the Soviet style. Okay?
I really want to go into innovation. Is where are we going? In particular, when we start thinking about more streamlining, not only of nuclear energy, but also of nuclear capability. For example, there's a lot of conversation about small nuclear reactors. Let's talk about then where you see nuclear energy coming in the next, let's say 10, 15 years, because again, there is that pressure of trying to decarbonize our society, and we have the goals for 2050. So what's up on the pipeline, Manuel? What's coming up?
Yeah, first, it is really important to understand that we should not confuse the ends with the means. Okay, so the end is to reduce the emissions. Okay, the end is not to install renewables. This is not the end. Renewables are a tool. Nuclear energy is another tool. The electrification of vehicles is another tool. The electrification of industrial production is another tool. We have many tools, and we have to use all of them. So in this scope, nuclear energy will be vital, as I mentioned at the beginning. Okay, so what we need in Europe is, first of all, extend the life operation of the existing nuclear power plants. Okay. So we have conventional commercial nuclear power plants. Many of them are of American design, okay? And in the United States, almost all the nuclear power plants have a license to operate 60 years, and several of them, they have already the license to operate 80 years. So first is the life extension, because we already have like 100 of nuclear reactors operating in Europe, and if we can keep them operating, then, okay, we have 20% of electricity already clean, okay? Second, we need to build new nuclear. So now the debate is if we are going to build large nuclear power plants, like the plants we have now, okay, 1 gigawatt or even more, or we are going to install small reactors, okay? And then this is a decision that, in my opinion, is a market decision. Okay, it's not a government decision. Because, of course, we will need a lot of electricity for the electrical systems, okay, but we will also need a lot of electricity and heat sources and hydrogen production and water desalination and other uses that can be achieved using nuclear energy, okay, small reactors, and this should be market decisions, okay? What will happen with small modular reactors is that the capital cost will be much lower than large reactors, okay? So, and this will open new possibilities, because now the entry barrier to the nuclear energy will be lower, okay? And this will allow to companies, private companies, to install small nuclear reactors for industrial uses.
The ones with a lot of energy needs for industry.
Yeah, for example, paper industry, steel industry, mining companies,
Cement
industry. So all of these industries, now they will have much lower entry barriers to install nuclear reactors, small nuclear reactors, okay? So this will be a game changer. And from the political point of view, we need to support these new opportunities, okay? The point is that we need to work on regulation, and we need to work on policy support, and the nuclear industry, they must, at the end, they must decide a handful of reactor designs, because now concerning small modular reactors we have more than 70 designs, okay? And we will not achieve a mass production, we will not achieve the production in factories if we are spreading the attention in 70 different designs. We will need to choose 2, 3, 4 designs, focus on that, and then reduce dramatically the cost. This will be the future of nuclear, in my opinion.
It's a fascinating point, which is that going from the macro, which is the typical nuclear power plants that we see, and then you're just mentioning, like, for example, but we can have this big company. We're not going to name names, but this company needs a lot of energy, and they can develop their own nuclear capability. And then maybe a smaller company could be like, oh, we want to get into that because you guys are making a lot of profit, just not, having to buy energy you can generate. So, but one last question, because I really have to ask you this, because I'm sure that our listeners want to hear that. But how micro can we get? So how much can we have, the capability of, like, for example, a city has a nuclear reactor?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we can go really micro, okay?
But should we?
Well, it depends on the uses, okay? It depends on the uses. For example, imagine that you are in an island, okay? A small island with, 100,000 inhabitants, okay? And you need a lot of water desalination. You can have a microreactor around 10 megawatts, for example, okay? There are several designs of 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 megawatts, okay? That it's really small reactor. You can load it in a truck, okay? You install the reactor. You don't need operation. It's like a battery, okay? It operates for 8, 10 years without refueling. And after 10 years, the company came and replaced the reactor. So you don't have a residues issue. You don't have operation issues. You don't have safety issues. You just have a battery operating at 10 megawatts 24/7 for 8 years, okay? And this is opening, this will be a game changer. And it will be, I have been in many international meetings concerning energy, nuclear energy, and I was in Brussels a few months ago talking about SMRs, and the European Commission was involved in the conversation. And it was the first time in my life that in the meeting there were private companies, steel companies, paper companies, mining companies. First time in my life. Okay, so this will be really a game changer.
Very good. It's a brave new world, and I'm so happy that I have you on the podcast. You laid it out very clearly for me and our listeners to continue to follow this work very closely. And on that, as a final note, tell us where listeners can follow your work online. Where are you online?
Well, I write several columns in newspapers, but are in Spanish, unfortunately.
That's fine. Google Translate works fine.
But I live mainly on Twitter and X. For other purposes, you can find me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
I'm going to put all the links on the podcast show notes. I've been talking with Manuel Fernández Ordóñez. Manuel, this was fascinating. Thank you so much. And I will have you on the podcast again so that we can go even with more details on this really fascinating field you work on.
Anytime. It was a pleasure.
Before we start recording that, you were saying that you live in Madrid for many years now, but you're actually from the north of the country. So what was the path that you took to get to the point that we're now talking?
Okay, so I went to college. I studied physicist. Okay, studied physics.
Brave man.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to do that again, but yeah. So I graduated in theoretical physics, particle physics. Okay, and then I made a PhD in nuclear physics. Part of the time in Germany, part of the time in Spain. And then I started to work for a research center in Spain in nuclear physics. So I was there around 5 years, and then I jumped into the private industry. So I've been in the private industry for 15 years now, in the energy industry and especially in nuclear energy. Okay, so this is the path that
Where did that interest come from? Did you, as a young kid, you were already fascinated by physics?
Yeah, since high school. Since high school, I was already reading a lot of, science books and so on. So I guess I always had the interest in science, not specifically in physics, but in science, generally, chemistry, biology, and so on. But yeah, I always felt something about, astrophysics, cosmos, and so on. So finally, I decided to study physics. Okay.
I think we're going to change the topic of our podcast, and we're just going to talk about astrophysics for the rest of
Yeah. Could be.
So still on that, then you did that, and now you're more connected to not only the academic part, but also helping Fundalib do some policy recommendations. Yeah. So for you, that's a very comfortable position, or would you like to explore a little more the questions of policy, politics, or you're just a pure academic and then...
No, it's not pure academic at all. I mean, I'm also quite interested in politics.
Oh, very good.
Okay, yeah. So the point is that the way we work in Fundalib is just we try to spread the word of liberty, of course, and also try to point out that all the things that we are doing not very well in Europe, okay? Energy is one of the topics. Of course, there are many more, okay? But this is what we try to do here at Fundalib. Yeah.
This is all for now. I'll be back soon with more podcasts. You can always visit the website liberalforum.eu to know more about the activities of the European Liberal Forum. So until the next episode, let's keep making the world a better place.
You were listening to the Liberal Europe podcast by the European Liberal Forum. This podcast was co-financed by the European Parliament.